Hey guys, welcome to lesson 5 of this IELTS speaking course. And today we are going to be covering a new strategy for part 3, as well as a total review of all of the strategies that we've covered. This is the review. We're going to review each strategy one by one here. So part 1, we did the 1+1 strategy. Okay? You give a short answer, and then you give one sentence of detailed support. Okay? We talked a lot about the different topics that you could expect to find in part 1. Part 1 is somewhat predictable, okay, in terms of the topic selection. So if you practice this 1+1 strategy with the topics that are typically in part 1, all right, you should be really well prepared and confident going into part 1. Now, if you notice in the course plan in lesson 1, it says part 1 fluency. Okay. I really tried to emphasize for part 1 the need for fluency, because part 2 and part 3 we're really trying to highlight our grammar abilities and our lexical abilities. All right, we're showing off how complex and how academic we can sound as we speak. All right, but sometimes we sacrifice a little bit of fluency in the process. Okay, it's a balancing act, okay? So what we can do in part 1 is back off the grammar, okay? Back off the high-level vocabulary, all right? Keep it simple and react quickly and authentically to the questions, okay? Because it not only shows your fluency skills, but it also gives you a lot of confidence going into parts 2 and part 3, okay? Generate a little bit of rapport with the examiner, okay? Show that you're comfortable, okay? As an examiner, I love to see that. If I can see that a student or an examinee has the confidence to talk with me, okay? It feels like a normal conversation, even though I'm reading my questions from a list. To me, that shows high fluency level, and I can see that the student or the examinee uses that as kind of momentum building into parts 2 and 3. Okay? So the 1+1 strategy is great, and just remember to highlight your fluency skills here. Okay? Now, part 2, the first strategy we learned was 4 corners. Okay? Part 2, the strategies really focused on how to organize your ideas. Okay, that's the thing that students have the most trouble with, is you talk for maybe 1 minute and then you run out of ideas. Okay, so how can you organize your ideas to give yourself lots of things to talk about, but we don't want it to be just rambling, right? So the most obvious and simple strategy is the 4 corners strategy, and that looks like this. You get your prompt, and you get these 4 pieces to each prompt. Every prompt has these 4 pieces. And you basically set up your notes like this. Okay, so notice when, where, who, why. And here, the same. Okay, you set it up in the same way, and then in those boxes, you add details as much as you can. Okay, and in those details, you want to try to pick out some key vocabulary words that you might want to use to show off a little bit what you can do. Okay, this was the first strategy that we talked about for part 2, and a lot of students prefer to use this simple strategy. Okay, now I prefer a different strategy. Okay, the 5 points strategy, and I would say most of my students over the months and over the years have preferred to use this one. Okay. Now, the 5-point strategy builds on the idea that every prompt, okay, like this prompt, is a suggestion. The first part you must follow. Describe a sporting event you watched or took part in. You should follow that instruction. However, the other part, the outline part, where it tells you the 4 things to talk about, that is a suggested outline. It's a suggested organization. You don't have to follow it. Unlike the writing, there is no score in the rubric for task completion, okay, or task achievement. Okay, you don't have to achieve the task. you cannot be punished for kind of wandering off topic a little bit. Okay? So, what I suggest in the 5-point strategy is to set up these 5 points: introduction, experience, detail, opinion, and hope. Okay? Now, as we saw, different question prompts, different prompts, okay, may highlight one of these more than the others. Okay? For example, the one that we saw here, describe a sporting event you watched. Well, that is clearly asking us to highlight the experience area, right? However, you can still hit all 5 of these points. You just may want to spend 45 seconds on the experience and only 10 or 15 seconds on the other areas. Okay? However, the key thing with 5 points is it works for every prompt, right? So every prompt that you get, you can hit these 5 points. And the nice thing about the 5 points is that they display, if you follow them, you will display a range of abilities in terms of your language. Okay? So with experience, you're hitting the past tenses. With detail, you're talking about, you're describing one element of your experience, and you can use a lot of specific and high-level adjectives to describe that little piece. Okay? Your opinion, you're using those opinion expressions, and you're comparing different things. Which one is better? Which one is worse? Right? Supporting your opinion with reasons, right? And then hope, at the end, you're giving your kind of your future idea. This also sounds very organized because, in a way, this is how an essay might be organized as well. Often we conclude the essay by looking into the future, right? And making a prediction or a hope or a suggestion, something like that. Something for the future, right? So reading essays, our minds are kind of trained to hear this last. So if you bring up that hope thing at the end, it really sounds like a conclusion, and it sounds like you know how to make a 2-minute kind of speech almost. It starts to sound like a speech the more you practice it. Sounds really polished, sounds really impressive when I hear students use a kind of format like this. Okay? So, please do it. Try it out. I think you'll enjoy it. And the more you practice it, the more you're going to improve with it, because you can use it for every prompt. Here's a little example. Okay, intro. Here's where the keywords I wrote. Experience, keywords, detail, keywords, opinion, keywords, and hope, keywords. And so as I gave my 2-minute speech, I hit all of those notes, and each one of those keywords helped me bring out my abilities. Okay, moving on. Into part 3. So this was yesterday's lesson, or the previous lesson, okay, lesson 4, where we talked about how to extend your answer. And very simply, these were the 4 strategies we used. Why? Explain your reasons, right? Just constantly explain in more and more and more detail, all right? Use examples to illustrate your ideas. Paraphrase the question, okay? You hear the question, basically repeat it back to, oh, did you mean blah, blah, blah? Repeat the question back to them, right? In a different way. Shows your paraphrasing skill, kills a little bit of time. And then finally, some people would say, okay, so instead of launching into your opinion right away, explore the other side first. It kills a little bit of time. Maybe you can spend 15 seconds exploring what your opponents might say or other people might say, and then link into your own idea, right? It just takes some of the pressure off. You know, if you need to talk for 30 or 40 seconds, talking for 10 seconds about someone else takes the pressure off of you a little bit. Okay? So that's been a review of the course so far. All right? I just wanted to remind you of these things. Sometimes when you watch the videos and you kind of space them out, you tend to forget some of the key kind of moments from the earlier lessons. I just wanted to remind you of those. Now, moving into today's lesson, hit the skills. All right? This is going to be similar to what we did in lesson 3. where we talked about how to do part 2 in a way that highlights your knowledge, your ability, rather than, let's say, your fluency. Okay? So if you're like many Chinese students, I would say most Chinese students, okay, often your knowledge of language is higher than your ability to naturally produce it. Okay? So this will help highlight your knowledge rather than your natural expression of those language skills. Okay? So let's talk about why part 3 is difficult for a minute. And I think you will understand why this strategy is so effective. So if you look at part 1 is predictable, right? We can predict the topics. However, it is spontaneous. In other words, the examiner asks you and you have to answer immediately with no hesitation. Part 2 is unpredictable. There's really no way to predict what question you're going to get. You can practice a lot, but it's really unlimited in terms of the topics you might get asked. However, it's not spontaneous. You have time to plan, which is nice. Okay, you have a minute to prepare. So that's the plus side of part 2 compared to part 1. Now, part 3 is the worst of both worlds. Okay, it is unpredictable. There's really no way to predict what's going to come up in part 3. You sort of know, based on part 2, the general topic area, but as far as the actual questions go, really no way to guess what they might be. And it's also spontaneous. You don't have time to prepare. Okay, this is what a lot of examinees struggle with. From what I can tell as an examiner, I ask the question and either they start answering right away and then they fizzle out, they just run out of ideas, or they pause and they wait and they develop their thoughts inside, and it's uncomfortable. It's not fluent. Their fluency score drops because of that. Okay? And I can see that it's making them nervous. That silence in the conversation is distracting for them as well as for me. Okay? Because they're thinking, oh my God, I'm failing. He's marking my score down. And they're right, but it's making them panic, right? So it's this kind of spiral that sort of gets worse and worse and worse until finally the test is over and they walk out of the room feeling bad about themselves. I feel really sorry about that. But that's the danger of part 3. Okay? It feels like no matter what strategy you use, wait and pause or answer immediately, you run into problems. So, I have a solution for this. Okay? I have a way of making part 3 easier for you. All right? By making it more predictable in a way. Okay? So I've looked at hundreds of part 3 questions. Okay? All the questions that I've been asking since I started as an examiner. And I broke them into 7 types. Okay? I was able to find sort of 7 patterns that typically come up in these exams. Now, each of these types gives you the chance to show off one particular language skill. Okay? Just like in part 2, where we broke it into 5 points, each one highlighting a skill, this is the same way. All right? Each question, in a way, is asking you to show off a particular language skill. And the nice thing about breaking it up like this is it makes it easier for you to practice at home. Okay? I'm sure you have a list somewhere of, 100 part 3 questions. And if you don't, okay, if you need more practice questions, just ask me. I have lots of them. Okay? I have big lists of them. All right? Just ask me and I'll give you some. Okay? But as you practice these questions, if you can start to think of them in terms of these categories, that gives you so much more confidence, right? So when the examiner says, what do you think will be the future of shopping? What you're thinking is future. Show off my future grammar, future skills, okay? And it gives you just a way to approach your answer instead of just thinking, oh, shopping in the future. Oh, God, I can't. What am I going to say about this? Instead, you're focusing on language rather than content so much, okay? Because to be honest, the examiner doesn't care about your content. You could say totally wrong and stupid things, but if you say it well, you're going to get a high score, okay? So don't try to sound smart with your content. Try to sound smart with your language skills, okay? And this is what will help you do it, okay? All right, let's go through them. Question 1, past. All right, this one should be similar in a way to the part 2 past section, or the past point. Let's look at an example. Have you ever felt that you were in a dangerous situation while traveling? Okay, have you ever, right? Have you ever felt? Okay, this is asking you to describe an experience, right? An experience in the past. Here's another one. Tell me about the last time you went shopping at a large market or shopping center. Okay, tell me about that time. Okay, so you can see how this lends itself to discussing the past. Okay. By the way, notice our topics here. The topic on the top is all about travel. Okay. The topic on the bottom is about shopping and money. All right. So I'm going to use those throughout the next few slides just so you can see that every topic you can find one of these question types within it. Question 2. Let's go the other side. Future. Do you think that international travel will become more popular in the next 10 years in your country? Okay, so there's a future prediction question. Will online shopping eventually replace the need for retail stores? Okay, another prediction question. All right. So with these predictions, you can imagine certain language that would lend itself. We'll talk about the language in a little bit. Let's just look at more examples for now. Question 3, your opinion. What do you think are the most important items to bring with you on a long trip? All right, what is your opinion about that? Is it better for people to buy food in large supermarket chains or smaller local shops? Again, which one is better? What is your opinion? Question 4 is different, although in a way similar, okay? Others' opinion. Okay, let's look at an example. Some people think that travel is beneficial for everyone. What do you think about that? Okay, so here we're asking you, the examiner is asking you, do you agree or disagree with someone else? Okay, it takes some different language use. Here's another one. Some people say that shopping for others is more difficult than shopping for oneself. Do you agree? Okay, another one where they're asking you, do you agree with other people? Question 5, cause and effect. What are some negative effects that tourism can have on an area? Okay, this is a typical question, actually. I've seen this on a few exams over the years. And another question, what problems does money cause in your country? Okay, so both of these lend themselves to language that show what the causes and effects of things are. Question 6, compare and contrast. What are the differences? What are the similarities between things? What's the difference between traveling domestically and traveling abroad? Okay, so it's an interesting one for contrast. Which is better, paying with cash or paying with a credit card? So there's a money-related one, right? Which one is better? It's sort of your opinion, but they're asking you very specifically to show or talk about the differences between these two things. Question 7, the final question here. What would you do? It's a kind of a hypothetical situation that they're asking you about. Okay, a lot of examinees that I've seen have struggled with this type of question because of the language that it requires, the language use. So if you could take someone on a 2-week trip with you, who would you choose? And if you could have a $10,000 shopping spree in any store, which store would it be? Okay. So let's go through these questions one by one and talk about how to highlight your ability to produce a certain type of language. Okay? So we can use what I will show you, these expressions and the grammar skills. Okay? But feel free to add more. Okay? I could be here for hours just giving you a list of different expressions, a list of different phrases or adverbs or adjectives that could help you in these scenarios. The key thing is just to keep a list. Okay, keep a list of not only the words that I show you, but add to that list yourself. Okay, the more you study, keep on adding to that. But you should have 7 different lists, one for each question type. Okay, practice with those lists. I promise you, you will get more and more confident as you practice. So, question 1. Here are some question types, here are some language skills or expressions that you can use to express the past. So the past simple, okay, I went to Bermuda. Past progressive, I was going to Bermuda. Past perfect, I had gone to Bermuda. Now, I should mention, okay, if you don't know how to use past progressive well, learn it before you use it. Okay, if you're not sure how to use it, or past perfect, if you don't know how to use it, don't do it. Okay, they don't mean the same thing. Okay, we don't use them in the same situations. Okay, if you would like to ask me about how to use these grammar tenses better, I'm a total grammar nerd. Okay, if I could teach a whole course just on grammar, I would do it. Okay, but it wouldn't sell because nobody wants to learn grammar. But if you yourself want to know more about this type of grammar, okay, just contact me directly. Okay, ask me in the VIP room. Okay, and I will help you with this. Okay, I promise. I love talking about grammar, and I'm happy to help. But don't try to throw it out there without a good, solid grasp of it. Okay, be careful. A lot of students get their score marked down because they think they know how to use that grammar and they don't. Okay, don't be one of those students. Okay, time expressions. This is also a great chance to show off how different time periods relate to each other. Okay, when I was in high school, okay, a decade ago. A decade is a good vocabulary word, right? Not so long ago, ages ago. And so there's a lot of expressions that show kind of casual English knowledge, like ages ago. That's a very conversational expression, okay? Or a decade ago, which is a more academic expression. So play to your skills, okay? If you spent time abroad, use time expressions that are more natural, more conversational, okay? If you have not, study those academic expressions and use them. Question 2, future. So for future, we've got the same 3 basic tenses you can use: simple, progressive, and perfect. And again, don't use them unless you know how. Other future words you can use, okay? Obviously, will is a bit stiff, okay, for conversational English. You may want to use things like hope, want, plan, predict. Okay, there's a lot of different future words you could use. And time expressions. Okay, so again, in a few years, before my 30th birthday, by the time I graduate, before, after, until, during. Okay, there's all these different time expressions you can use, right? They all are impressive to the examiner. Okay, so keep those things in mind with both past and future tenses plus time relationships. All right. Question 3, expressing your opinion. here's some ways to, a little more interesting ways to express your opinion. In my personal opinion, in all honesty, I would have to say that, as for me, blah, blah. All right. Those 4 expressions are great. There are 1,000 more. Okay. So if you want more, ask me. I'm sure you could find a list just by a very quick internet search. Opinion expressions. You'll find a list of 100 of them. But if you want to know which ones are most natural, feel free to ask me. Okay. Opinion strengtheners. So these are ways to, you can add these into your opinion to strengthen them, and they're also impressive in their linguistic complexity. Okay? Because these are adverb phrases or adverbs. That's a complex skill. All right? That will be noticed by the examiner. Okay? Without a doubt is a good one. Absolutely. Without question. Definitely. All 4 of those are very natural. If you can use them well, it'll sound great. Question 4. Other's opinion. All right, so you need to either agree or disagree with the other person. To agree, here are some good expressions. I couldn't agree more. I agree with that 100%. That matches my point of view exactly. Okay, now that third one, a little more academic, right? Disagreeing expressions, okay? If you don't agree, you've got some options, okay? I can't say that I agree with that. That's a nice kind of a little more subtle, like it's not just I disagree. You say, I can't say I agree. Very subtle, okay? I understand the sentiment, but blah, blah, blah. Okay? There's a lot of these kind of expressions. I understand what they mean. Let's see, what would be another good one? I see what they mean. Okay? I understand the sentiment. I understand their idea, but da, da, da. And I beg to differ. Okay? Now, again, you can use these disagreeing expressions and add to that, okay? Build onto that some what we talked about last lesson, where you can talk about the other person's ideas for a little while before you disagree. Okay? So you could say something like, I understand the sentiment. In fact, they might think this way because da-da-da-da-da. For example, da-da-da-da-da. But I would have to say that I disagree because da-da-da-da-da. See, so I've kind of extended the disagreement into about 10 or 15 seconds, and then I move on, okay, to my own opinion. All right. Okay, so question 5, cause and effect. All right, so there are 5 expressions I have here for showing cause and effect. Again, there are hundreds more, okay, and a quick internet search will reveal a ton more. Probably you know a lot more yourself. You see a lot of these when you study reading or listening, okay? These cause and effect words are frequently used as paraphrasing material for IELTS writers when they're writing the reading passages or the listening passages. We love to play with these expressions while we're writing and test the test taker's ability to catch them, okay? So if you've taken my reading class, if you've taken my listening class, you have seen all of these expressions before. These are key paraphrasing expressions. But use them productively, and you can show off a complex understanding of how to express cause and effect, okay? Due to the fact that, as a result, it was a primary cause of da-da-da. Or as a consequence, right? They make you sound smart, all right? And they'll give you a higher score. Question 6, compare and contrast. Okay, so comparative adjectives, when you're comparing 2 different things, we talked about this in part 2 as well. Okay, so expressions like more fascinating than, more entertaining than, more difficult than, easier than. All right, study that grammar a bit, review that grammar so that you don't make mistakes with it. But if you can use comparatives well, okay, that gives you a lot to talk about. Also, if you want to show how things are similar, okay, we've got not so different from blah, blah, blah. Okay, share several key features, right? Those two expressions are good ways to say they're the same. And you can use that sort of like with the other's opinion. Okay, so for example, some people might say that taking a train is more scenic than taking an airplane. However, in my opinion, taking an airplane is better because it is more convenient and it is also more efficient in terms of how much time you spend, right? And in terms of how much money you spend. In many countries, taking a train is much more costly than taking an airplane. You see how I did that? More costly, okay? More efficient, more convenient, more scenic. I used 4 comparisons in there, and I used all of them correctly. The examiner will notice that for sure. Okay, so when you're asked to compare 2 different things, mix in the other's opinion, use a couple comparatives, and then use the use your own opinion with comparatives as well. Okay, but when you hear this question type, you should be thinking, boom, here's my chance to show off comparative language. Okay. Question 7, what would you do? The grammar here is not that complicated, but it's amazing how many students mess it up. Okay. Use would or could. That's it. Okay. It's an unreal situation. Don't use will. Don't use can. Those are incorrect. Okay. We're asking if, what was the example that we had? Let me go back. If you could take someone on a 2-week trip with you, who would you choose? They give you the language in the question. So often I hear, I will choose blah, blah, blah. And it's just immediately grammar down, you know? This question is testing specifically that ability. Okay? That one, more than any other, is focused in on one specific language skill. And if you get it wrong, your score's going down. Okay? So make sure you recognize that when you hear that if question, think, this is my chance to show that I can use conditionals correctly. Okay? Use could to talk about 2 different possibilities. That's a great way to extend your answer. Okay? So they might ask you, who would you take on that trip? Well, I could either take my brother or I could take my girlfriend. And now you can talk about comparatives, right? Let's see. My girlfriend would probably be a bit more picky when we traveled. However, my brother would be more... I can't think of a disadvantage for my brother. I'm trying to think. However, my girlfriend is prettier than my brother, so that might make a difference. Okay? Boom. So notice how expanding into 2 options gives you comparative ideas, plus it just extends your original answer. So now you've got 2 people to talk about. Okay? So all of these skills kind of go together, okay? You can use them in combination with each other, right? So start with, hitting those skills, right? Consider the question type, try to add that language skill, and then extend with examples, why, okay, all those details we talked about. Okay, and the more you practice those question types, the more natural it will become, and the confidence, that's the big key. So when you hear, for example, a comparative question, okay, it's a really obviously, when you hear a comparative question, it's so obvious, right? Here's a comparative question again. What's the difference? Which is better? So obvious, right? So instead of hearing that and thinking, Oh, traveling domestically, traveling abroad. Oh, I can't think. What should my opinion be? See how you're just focusing on content, right? It makes you start to panic. This is how I see students panicking. They want to say something clever. They want to say their true opinion. Forget all that. It doesn't matter what you say. What matters is how you say it. Right? So as soon as you hear comparative, this kind of question, you should be thinking, what kind of adjectives can I use to impress this examiner? Right? Because I know comparative really well. I studied this really well. I have a lot of confidence with my ability to use comparative adjectives. Okay? So boom, traveling domestically, traveling abroad. More, culturally, you can have a more open mind. You can see more interesting sights, more, right? You see how my brain is working on the language, not the content so much, right? And the more you practice that, the more it will come. Okay? So that's really the takeaway with this skill, okay, is to practice so that when the question comes, you can identify the type immediately and know in your head, you have the language skill to deal with that question. Then the content comes second, okay? Language skill first, content second.